Adams was part of a, quote, long-running conspiracy by accepting gifts from foreign business people. How New York City is responding to these indictments.
Plus, Israel kills the leader of Hezbollah in Lebanon. As strikes continue, fears of a wider war are growing. We'll bring you the latest from the Middle East.
Plus, the vice presidential showdown is happening tomorrow evening. What to expect when the candidates hit the stage. All that and more. Talking Point starts right now. $128 people today after making landfall in Florida last week. Welcome into Talking Points. I'm Jake Morrell.
And I'm Luke Radel. Almost 2 million people are still without power tonight and have no idea if their loved ones survived the storm after destroyed communication lines.
The fire chief of hard-hit Asheville, North Carolina, says the city suffered, quote, a tremendous amount of wreckage.
President Biden is set to visit the affected communities later this week. Many government officials have expressed their condolences as they continue to receive briefings on the situation.
And the sitting in New York
to have an unprecedented response.
Doing the best they can in every challenging circumstances. We do need some help from the federal government. They have to get together, ideally with the governor. That governor needs to he's been trying to get them, and I'm sure they're going to come through. But he's been calling the president, hasn't been able to get him.
Turning now downstate to New York City, the sitting New York City mayor is facing federal charges for the first time. Eric Adams was indicted this week on conspiracy, wire fraud, and bribery charges. Our Alex Burstein joins us in studio to break down what's next. Alex, how are things looking for Adams?
Yeah, guys, it's not looking great for him after New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez was indicted on corruption charges with Egypt earlier this year. Now, perhaps the most powerful mayor in America faces a similar issue on relations with Turkey. A 5-count indictment showed Adams has had a years-long relationship with the Middle Eastern nation. That included illegal campaign donations and free hospitality from the foreign nation in exchange for favorable actions from Adams. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams unveiled their charges earlier this week.
But as we allege, year after year after year, he kept the public in the dark. He told the public he received no gifts, even though he was secretly being showered with them.
According to Williams, these favors did not immediately end after the election. This comes during a recent frenzy of other top city officials in the Big Apple being investigated and in some cases resigning. This includes former New York City Police Commissioner Edward Caban, but the New York City mayor remains committed that he's not guilty.
This did not surprise us that we reached this day. And I ask New Yorkers to wait to hear our defense before making any judgments.
Friday, Adams pleaded not guilty to the federal charges in court. He's now ordered to not have communications with anyone involved in the allegations, though he is allowed to keep his passport and maintain his usual contacts for business. While maintaining his innocence, Adams has steadfastly committed to not stepping down, so as court proceedings continue, he'll stay in power for the time being.
Alex, you mentioned Adams is refusing to step down. How could he potentially be replaced?
Yeah, so as he's not resigning, the only other option really at this point is the governor, Kathy Hochul, who has power in the state constitution to remove the mayor. It's not something that's seen a lot. You have to go back to the early 20th century to see something like this happen in 1932. Then Governor Franklin Delano Roosevelt actually removed the New York City governor, but this is not something that is seen often, and we'll see right now there's really been no indication from Hochul on whether or not he would consider a move like this.
Interesting piece of history there, Alex. Now, as all this has been going on, we heard the response from stateside officials. How has the Turkish government been responding?
Yeah, I mean, these are obviously pretty big allegations. You don't want to be a foreign government interfering in elections in America. So right now, they're really trying to toss aside any idea of them interfering in these elections. They've been bringing up the Vienna Convention a lot, diplomatic relationships with the United States, not something they want to surrender. And earlier this week, in a written statement from the Foreign Ministry of Turkey, they were just really saying they were not involved in this.
Alex Burstein, Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Let's head a little further upstate now, shall we? One congressional district is getting more attention than any other nationwide. And it just so happens to be right to our south. Talking Points analyst Peter Barry tells us about the most expensive House race in the country, New York's 19th district. Hey, Peter.
Hey, Luke and Jake. It's great to be on tonight. The New York 19th congressional district race is having over $35 million put into it. Political action committees, or PACs, are the biggest spenders for all these campaigns. For example, the GOP's Congressional Leadership Fund is backing the Republicans, while the House Majority PAC is supporting the Democrats. The election is having a rematch from back in 2022 when Molinaro beat out Democrat Josh Riley by less than 5,000 votes. Congressman Molinaro is now seeking re-election for the first time. Here's how he's making his case.
D.C. lawyer Josh Riley's firm helped Chinese manufacturers. They worked for an importer of Chinese equipment that sued their American competition, attacking American jobs.
See, he's putting that $35 million to good work. The Democrats hope a Riley victory will help them regain the House majority as well. Here's a piece from a Riley ad.
Mark Molinaro doesn't respect you enough, to be honest. The fact is, Molinaro has voted against abortion rights 13 times.
So you voted against putting Roe v. Wade into law?
Correct, yes. I voted against that.
Americans believe abortion should happen in some way, shape, or form, according to Pew Research. But it is very important that the Democrats win these seats back, as they lost 6 of them. One was overturned in a special election, but their wins are going to be seen as decisive, as the GOP has a 1-vote majority. But why they're spending so much money on this is because they have to hit 4 stations. They have to hit Syracuse, they have to hit Binghamton, they have to hit parts of New York City, and they also have to hit Albany.
Yeah, we've been seeing those ads here in Syracuse for the district.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that they have to hit so many major media markets, and they've had a lot of these ads out there. I've seen them myself sitting down watching Sunday Night Football, but we saw them hit each other over a couple issues there. What else are they attacking each other over?
They're more attacking each other over immigration, abortion, the economy. You know, 30% of voters care about the economy here, but we're no stranger in New York here to seeing big primary elections be donated money to. As we saw back in June, George Latimer and Jamal Bowman were both given around $24 million. That is the most expensive primary in election history. But we'll take a look at where they're hitting the markets on Syracuse and Albany, and they're also bordering Massachusetts and New York City here.
It's a sprawling district. There's a lot of counties included in there.
Yeah, it just got redistricted, but let's take a look at the poll from July. This is a Molinaro internal poll that had Molinaro up by 9. This is when Biden was still in the race. But let's take a look at another poll, according to RMG Research, which was founded by Scott Rasmussen and skews more Republican. Riley is leading by 3, but the margin of error is still 5 points. And according to Politico, they're putting this still at a toss-up here.
So it really is anybody's race. Peter Barry, thank you so much. Can't say that I was watching Sunday Night Football that closely. What happened last night? I really don't know. Coming up on Talking Points, Vice President Kamala Harris heads to the border, and we'll take you to our Talking Points toss-up state of the week in 90 seconds.
Hey, Bobo, do trees tell each other stories?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Can birds draw pictures?
I don't have an answer for that.
Dad, do stars visit their friends?
Look!
Women are bad with money.
That's what the world's been saying for centuries.
But now, we've got something to say. Save it. Save the old-fashioned advice, the empty excuses. It's all worthless, unlike us.
To our fellow females, it is time to save ourselves by saving our money.
Contributing to our futures, investing in our independence. until we're no longer 80%
80% more likely than men to live in poverty in retirement.
So again, we say to that, save it.
The falsehoods, the feelings of fault, then the funds.
Learn how to save for your retirement at wesaysaveit.org.
Well, folks, T-minus 5 weeks until Election Day, and Vice President Kamala Harris is tackling an issue that has hurt her so far in the polls. Our Ben Bassick is here to explain why she went to this week's Talking Points toss-up state, Arizona. Hey, Ben.
Hi guys, yeah, she took a brief visit to Arizona. The Harris campaign is kind of trying to flip-flop the script on immigration through this visit to the southern border. This issue has been a vulnerability for her. In a CNN poll released last week, 50% of registered voters said they trust Trump for the job on immigration, while just 34% said the same for Harris. Now, Harris spoke to crowds during her brief trip last Friday to Southwest Arizona, where she proposed tighter asylum restrictions, vowing to crack down on the flow of fentanyl, very much emphasizing her role as a former prosecutor. Now, what she was saying is that she's blaming Trump for immigration, right? She's taking blame on him and saying, you rejected the border bill that went through the Senate. Obviously, he disagrees and points the finger right back at Harris. Now, last week in Michigan, Trump vowed the, quote, largest deportation in American history. He bit right back at Harris in that Michigan rally, saying a lot of this is her fault, with 10.1 million immigrants surging in over the border, blaming the Biden administration for this influx in immigration, even though after they recharacterized what they count as encounters, he still blames her at the end of the day. And so they're pointing fingers at each other, and the National Border Patrol Council Vice President Art DeQuelto expressed his frustrations with the 10.1 million as well, illegal entries since the Biden-Harris administration took office in 2020. So again, lots of people on both sides of this issue, especially in the union itself, speaking out against Harris. The head of the National Sheriff's Department also spoke out against Harris, saying that this was really just a photo op, that this really didn't mean a whole lot, especially for the people of Southwest Arizona. And with the vice presidential debate tomorrow night and the election quickly approaching, we know voters want action on the border, but some doubt is that either party is capable of producing that action.
Ben, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. We know that the border is a big issue in that state, but has the rhetoric from Donald Trump and J.D. Vance on immigrants hurt their standing with Latino voters? Our Harrison Calder is here to break down a new poll from NBC News and Telemundo that's tracking that issue. Harrison, good evening.
Luke, good evening. Exactly right. Two of the big things to focus on in this upcoming election are looking at what people's primary issues are, as well as demographics. And here's one demographic right here. Latino voters from this NBC News poll we're looking at, 54% favoring Kamala Harris. On the other side, 40% for Donald Trump. And even though that may look like a large gap and a big advantage for Harris, it's really not. When you look at past years, it is a large drop-off. You look at now with its plus 14 in favor of the Democrats. 2020 was plus 33 for Joe Biden over Donald Trump. Even going back to 2016, you have plus 38 with Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. And then 2012 had Barack Obama beating Mitt Romney by 44 points. So that is a huge drop-off in putting the Democrats in a tougher spot in terms of Latino voting. And then when you look at Arizona, and how the polls are looking this upcoming election between Trump and Harris, Harris holding a slight lead of 48 to 47%, not a large gap, but change that to the Senate race between Ruben Gallego and Kari Lake. It is a large difference. That is a lot there, 56% to 42%. So you can tell that Gallego has a very strong lead and definitely in control of this one. So we'll see how Kari Lake and her team is able to respond in the last 40-some days left.
Harrison, very interesting numbers coming out of Arizona. We're joined now back at the desk with Ben Bassick. Ben, why do you think there's such a gap between Kari Lake and Donald Trump?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a candidate right here with Kari Lake, somebody who Trump endorsed in the past, somebody who capitalized really on election denying in her own race as well as the presidential race. And we look at where she stands with independents, because at the end of the day, Arizona's in the Sun Belt. Those independents are going to decide in the presidential election as well as the Senate race. And she's polling, a mayor's poll came out, said that Gallego is 64%. She's only at around 32% with those independents. Not sure if she's going to be able to swing that over the next 5 weeks. I mean, there is still some time left, but we'll have to see if she's capable of doing that.
Ben, Carrie Lake used to be just like us. I mean, she was a local news anchor.
Radio announcer, just like us? I don't know.
I see a lot of similarities with Luke.
Same here, same
But
here.
speaking of similarities, we talk about how much Carrie Lake and Trump have both hit on immigration. Obviously, Arizona, a big swing state, also a border state. How have the two of them sort of used that rhetoric to try and gain independent voters in Arizona, Harrison?
They've used it a lot, but Carrie Lake has been on a weird agenda when it comes to it. You've touched on it a lot. With Kamala Harris coming to Arizona and to the border, Carrie Lake was very strong, and she had a quote that really showed how strong she was against Kamala Harris, and talking about how, if we can take a look at it, just looking at how strong, and she was really adamant about how she was against Kamala Harris. She was against her coming. And it says, I hope that she had some shame for what she had done, not only to Arizona, but to this entire beautiful country. Kamala Harris has been an abject failure when it comes to the border. It's a very strong statement and a very strong take from Carrie Lake in terms, and it's definitely going to show a lot about independent voters on whether they're okay with language like that.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. Harrison, Ben, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, Arizona isn't the only state that candidates need to focus on, although it is our toss-up state of the week. Thank you, Luke. Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, which were dubbed the Blue Wall in 2020, are all a top priority for Harris and Trump. With why these three states are the consistent tipping point in elections, we bring in Talking Points analyst Andrea Rose Oates. Andy.
In a matter of weeks, the race to the White House between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump has become extremely competitive in Michigan and Wisconsin. Polls from this year are the most competitive from any election we have seen in the past. In a recent CNN College poll asking Americans if the 2024 presidential election were held today, who would you vote for if the candidates were Harris and Trump? Close numbers presented both Michigan and Wisconsin. In the Great Lakes state, 47% are supporting Trump, while 48% plan to support Harris. In Wisconsin, 47% are supporting Trump versus a 49% strong for Harris. Michigan and Wisconsin are two of the states at the top of the state priority list this election season. The number one state on the list being Pennsylvania. Number 2 is Michigan, and number 4 is Wisconsin. These states are all reflective of the polarization and the divisions of American politics, like urban and rural areas and white and blue collar workers as well, which have moved the GOP everywhere this election season. These states are so powerful alone during election season that political analysts like to refer to them as one state, Meepowy. As you can see here, we have the numbers, and specifically looking at Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, you see we have Donald Trump with 43% and Vice President Harris with a 52% support. Now, what's really important about the Electoral College, especially when looking at, how this affects the election as a whole, you see that there's a 9-point difference. But if we do end up with a tie with both 269, meaning that Donald Trump successfully wins all the Sun Belt battleground states, as well as Harris winning the Great Lakes states, then there is a possibility that we could have a tie when it comes to the Electoral College, and then eventually that would be taken to Congress. Now, I also want to talk about the fact that Vice President Harris's advantage from early August has slightly begun to chisel away, especially because Trump has a stronger stance on economic issues. The economy is the number one issue driving American voters this election season, followed by abortion and reproductive rights, and finally, the importance of immigration as well. Now, while Trump remains broadly disliked in America, Harris is still having problems bringing out full voter support, mainly because while a lot of people didn't like Trump's presidency, even more people don't like Harris's policies and feel that they would only hurt them instead of helping them. Now, when talking about the black voters specifically in the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio, it's actually very interesting to see that Harris has 80% of support versus just Trump's 13% support as well. So it's definitely going to be interesting to look at specifically the states of Michigan and Wisconsin this season. Luke and Jake, back to you.
Andy, thank you. Meepowy, I like that. I've never heard that. Some people call it the Big Ten. But coming up on Talking Points, meetings from both Trump and Harris with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky were described as, quote, very different by former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. What these differences were when we come back.
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Can birds draw pictures?
I don't have an answer for that.
Dad, do stars visit their friends?
Look!
They'll test you. Try to break your will. But however loud the loudness gets, however many cheese puffs may fly, you're the driver, the one in control. Stand firm. Just wait. And move only when you hear the click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.
The black truck? Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzz and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So, yeah, I know, that's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
Welcome back into Talking Points. Jake Morrell alongside Luke Radel. Last week, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. The meetings come just weeks before the U.S. presidential election, as there is no end in sight for the war in Europe.
Is that coming up?
Here to walk us.
Election?
What'd you say?
Is that the election's coming up?
That's
exciting.
So. That's news to me.
Can't wait. Here we
go.
go.
Here to walk us through the two meetings is Talking Points analyst Ethan Kraut. Ethan.
Hey, Jake. President Zelensky was in the U.S. last week for the UN General Assembly meeting. During his meeting at the White House, he discussed the ongoing war and made an urgent plea to both President Biden and Vice President Harris. While making remarks with Zelensky by her side, Harris referenced how Republicans would handle the war if they were in office. Take a listen.
However, in candor, I share with you, Mr. President, there are some in my country who would instead force Ukraine to give up large parts of its sovereign territory, who would demand that Ukraine accept neutrality and would require Ukraine to forego security relationships with other nations. These proposals are the same of those of Putin.
Now, while she did not directly state his name, it was clear Harris was referring to Trump. After his meeting with Biden and Harris, Zelensky took the trip back up north to Manhattan to meet with the former president in Trump Tower on Friday. During their meeting, Trump continued to state that if he was in office, the war would be over quickly because of his good relations with Putin. Take a listen to what he had to say to reporters.
So we have a very good relationship, and I also have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly. I really think we're going to get it resolved.
I hope we have more good relations.
We're going to have. Oh, I see. Yeah, but you know, it takes two to tango. You know, and.
At the end there, here's Zelensky interject saying he hopes Trump has a better relationship with him than Putin, but Trump seems to just brush it off.
How that works there, Ethan. Now, aid to Ukraine has been a heated topic throughout Biden's presidency. So how are voters responding to this question as we come up to the election year?
Yeah, look, this is still an issue that's divided the country. Now, there's a poll from Pew Research Center that says that 31% of Americans believe that if the U.S. is giving too much aid to Ukraine, 25% say that they're giving the right amount, and 24% say that the U.S. actually still needs to give more aid to Ukraine. They're not giving enough. Now, this is also a very partisan issue, with about half Republicans believing they're giving too much, but only 16% Democrats. Guys?
Ethan, thank you. Turning now to the Middle East, where fears are growing of a wider war. In the past few hours, Israel has continued its attacks on Hezbollah, which the U.S. government calls a terrorist group. Our Talking Points analyst, Nando Traversari, has the latest on the issues. Nando.
Good evening, Jake. Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just recently addressed the Iranian people following the Israeli airstrikes in Beirut on Friday, which actually targeted the headquarters of Hezbollah that led to the death of their leader Hassan Nasrallah. Here's what he had to say about the conflict.
Don't let a small group of fanatic theocrats crush your hopes and your dreams. You deserve better.
Concerns over the repressed Iranian people by justifying the airstrikes that resulted in at least 33 fatalities and 195 injuries, according to Lebanon's health ministry. And just coming in this morning, there have been more airstrikes within the city limits of Beirut for the first time since the war broke out, as well as an Israeli ground operation in southern Lebanon.
We're getting new reports in now from CNN about things going beyond airstrikes, of a ground operation happening now in southern Lebanon by Israeli military forces. What are the reactions that we're seeing to this potential of a wider war from world leaders on these recent attacks?
Well, on the eve of the attacks this past Friday, many diplomats and the UN delegates actually stood up and walked out of the UN General Assembly ahead of Netanyahu's speech as a form of protest to the war in Gaza and the recent attacks in Lebanon. And just this past weekend, actually, on the other side of the pond, as President Biden added that the U.S. really has to avoid an all-out war in the Middle East, saying, quote, we've already taken precautions relative to our embassies and personnel who want to leave, but we're not there yet. But we're working like hell with the French and many others, end quote. So, you know, Biden has also called Nasrallah killing as a measure of justice for the victims. And the interesting part of this is that before this, actually, Netanyahu rejected a U.S. and France proposed 21-day ceasefire along the Israeli-Lebanon border, and which frustrated American officials who believe he supported it at first. So again, these developments escalate tensions between Israel and its regional counterparts, raising concerns about a potential conflict that could perhaps be worse than the current Israel-Palestine situation. Guys, back to you.
Nando, thank you. Coming up on Talking Points, it could be the last debate for this election, a showdown between VP candidates tomorrow night. What to expect after the break.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
Hey, look, it's those guys. Are you good to drive?
I'm fine.
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Go and step out of the vehicle for me.
See ya, buddy. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
Welcome back into Talking Points. Tomorrow night is the first and only vice presidential debate happening on CBS News at 9 o'clock. And we want to take a look at how the VP candidates have been doing in the race so far in terms of their favorability. So this is from the Associated Press poll. The favorable opinion of J.D. Vance, 27%. Unfavorable at 57%. That's minus 30. He's underwater right now. Compare that, flip the situation around. Tim Walz, the Democratic nominee for vice president, he's up by 10 right now. Favorable, 42%. Unfavorable, 32%. You think they can move those numbers tomorrow night?
I think they can move those numbers tomorrow night. I think it's going to be interesting to see each strategy. I think what Vance is going to try to do is a little bit like what Trump did in the first debate with Biden, where he's just going to try and let Walz get over his skis a little bit. We know Tim Walz is an energetic guy. He was a high school football coach. He brings the energy to his speeches. He could bring the energy to the debate, and if he gets over his skis a little bit, I think Vance could capitalize on that. But I'm sure Walz has been training with the same people who helped Harris prepare for her debate with Trump, where she did that exact thing right back to Trump. So I think it'll be interesting to see.
And he was a defensive coordinator, so if Vance goes out on offense and tries to attack the Harris-Walz record, he might know how to figure that out.
I have a thing about this, Luke. I think instead of the debate, they should just play a game of NCAA 25. like full 15-minute quarters, we should just see who wins. I mean, he could be Minnesota, he could be Ohio State. That's a tough matchup, but Walz was a coach. I think he could do it.
I do feel like that'd be more interesting. Now, we talked about this during the last debate that we had. There's another debate that's been proposed by Kamala Harris for later in this month. Do you think that that's going to happen?
I don't think it's going to happen.
So this is it? This is all we're getting?
I think this is it. And that's all the time we have for you on Talking Points today. I'm Jake Morell.
And I'm Luke Riddle. You guys have a great night and enjoy the debate.